The chamber of the Galactic Council stood at the center of Veltor Prime, a world of glass and flame, where 7 suns blazed above its sky, and the light pouring through the crystal dome turned everything into shades of gold and crimson. Hundreds of alien delegates filled the room, their bodies glimmering with armor, fur, scales, and metal, the air thick with arrogance and heat. At the heart of the grand chamber stood the accused, one human, small and still, his gray hair silver in the light. His face calm as the universe watched him stand alone. His name was Elias Vale, Earth's chosen diplomat, once a soldier, now the man who had been sent to defend humanity before the greatest powers in existence. Above him hung banners of the Council's emblem, an endless spiral of stars bound by chains, the symbol of their control. Every seat around him was filled with eyes burning with the same expression, contempt. "Let the record show," boomed the Speaker of the Council, his voice like grinding glass, his massive crystalline form catching light as he rose from his throne, "that the species known as humanity stands accused of defiance against the galactic order." His words echoed through the chamber, bouncing off walls carved from glowing stone. "You have refused to comply with the unified energy tax, you have insulted our authority, and you have dared to question the structure of peace itself." He turned his facete head toward Elias. "How do you plead, human?" Silence followed, long and suffocating. Billions watched from across the galaxy through shimmering holofeeds, aliens of every kind whispering, laughing, mocking. Humans were young, fragile, emotional, foolish. How could they stand against the council that had ruled for millennia? Elias looked up at the towering creature before him, his expression unshaken, his hands folded behind his back. "I don't plead," he said quietly, his voice steady. "I speak." The speaker's glow flickered, as if insulted. "You stand before this council as a criminal, not as an equal." Elias tilted his head slightly. "Then it's strange you keep calling this a hearing," he said, his tone polite but sharp, the chamber filled with hisses and low growls from alien delegates. The reptilian warlord of the Drakari Alliance slammed a clawed fist against the table. "You forget your place, Terran," he snarled. "Your kind were granted space travel by our mercy." Elias smiled faintly. "And yet, we seem to have used it better than you." Laughter rippled faintly among the human observers watching from Earth's hidden relay feeds, but in the chamber, fury burned. The council speaker slammed his staff against the floor, light cracking through the tiles like lightning. "Enough," he thundered. "Humanity has been tolerated long enough. This hearing will strip your world of sovereignty and place your fleet under council command. Your arrogance ends here." Cameras focused on Elias, capturing every blink, every breath, waiting for him to break, but he did not move. He only spoke softly. "We've already paid your price." His voice carried through the entire hall, calm as the sea before a storm. "You just don't know it yet." The room froze, even the speaker paused. The translation units processed his words in dozens of languages, repeating the phrase again and again, and then laughter broke out, hundreds of voices of mockery and disbelief. The council speaker leaned forward, his crystalline mouth curling into what might have been a smile. "Paid our price? You refuse to pay your taxes, your tribute, your obedience, and you claim payment? Explain, human, what price have you paid that equals defiance?" Elias did not look away, his gray eyes cold and knowing. "We gave you trust," he said quietly, "and that was worth more than all the stars you own." Murmurs spread, confused and mocking. The speaker scoffed. "Riddles? You will leave here in chains." Elias raised his wrist slowly, tapping his device once, and every holoscreen in the chamber flickered. The council guards moved to stop him. But it was already too late. The projection system shifted from the trial feed to something else. Files, thousands of files, scrolling faster than eyes could follow, names, documents, images, recordings. The chamber went silent as they began to realize what they were seeing: alien soldiers torturing prisoners, council fleets glassing colonies, slave auctions disguised as resource management, secret votes, stolen planets, bribed officials. Every crime the council had buried under centuries of propaganda was now exposed in light for the galaxy to see. On distant worlds, citizens of the council watched in horror as their leaders' secrets filled their screens. Protests began before the trial even ended, riots ignited within hours, and in the grand chamber, the speaker's glow flickered wildly. "What have you done?" he roared. "This is treason." "No," Elias said simply. "This is truth." The council guards tried to seize him, but their weapons failed, the energy cells drained, their systems crashing. One shouted into his communicator, "Security override. Lock the human out." But the system replied in cold monotone, "Access denied. Route control transferred to Terran protocol." The council members looked at each other in shock, realizing too late that their network, their entire security system, was built on human code code they had ordered Earth to write centuries ago, the code that now belonged to Elias. "You wanted to humiliate us," Elias said, his voice calm as chaos broke out. "Now it's your turn." The speaker slammed his staff again, shards of light flying. "You will be executed." Elias turned toward him, eyes unblinking. "You've already been judged." And then he did something no one expected. He laughed, not the laughter of arrogance or cruelty, but of inevitability, soft and human, and that laughter echoed through every transmission, through every feed, reaching billions who watched in awe, and for the first time, the galaxy heard the sound of humanity laughing not out of madness, but out of understanding. Because they had realized something long ago, that those who think themselves gods are the easiest to bring down. The speaker shouted for silence, but the chamber was already in disarray, delegates shouting, guards panicking, cameras cutting, the entire broadcast collapsing into noise, and through it all, Elias walked slowly toward the exit, the guards moving aside. Unsure if they were afraid or ashamed, he stopped once, glancing back at the chaos behind him. "This was never a trial," he said quietly. "It was a mirror." When he stepped outside, the air of Veltor burned with heat, the suns glaring down on a city of crystal towers, their reflections trembling in the glass as explosions began to echo in the distance. The riots had reached the capital already, civilians throwing down banners of the council, tearing them apart. Elias raised his wrist one last time, sending a silent signal across the Terran network. "Transmission complete," said the AI in his earpiece. "All systems confirmed." Elias exhaled slowly, looking up at the seven suns. Then it begins. Far above, in orbit, hidden Terran ships cloaked in the dark watched from the shadow of the planet, silent, patient, unseen. Their captains listening to the chaos below. One of them asked, "Do we intervene?" The reply came back from Earth itself. "No. Let them burn their own lies first." On every world, the broadcasts continued to loop, alien citizens staring in horror at the proof of what their rulers had done, and for the first time in centuries, the galaxy questioned its own truth, the myth of the Council's perfection shattered by the smallest of species. A single human with a single device had undone an empire of gods, and as the suns of Veltor set that night, every screen across the stars displayed the same words in Terran Standard: "Justice does not ask permission." The trial of Earth was over, but something greater had begun, the quiet war of truth, and in the silence that followed, as the stars flickered like watching eyes, the galaxy finally understood why humans were dangerous. Not because of their weapons, but because when the universe tried to break them, humanity simply laughed and rebuilt stronger, their defiance eternal, their patience infinite, their laughter the sound of the end of tyranny. Chaos filled the chamber long after Elias had left. The great hall of the Galactic Council, once proud and untouchable, now echoed with shouting, accusations, and the rising panic of those who had never faced consequences before. Alien diplomats tore off their ceremonial robes as the massive holoscreens above them replayed the images of their own crimes. One delegate screamed that the humans must have faked everything. Another demanded the immediate execution of every Terran citizen on Council worlds. But the speaker stood frozen, his crystalline body flickering with unstable light. Even he could feel the truth sinking in. The files were real, the Council's own encryption marks were visible on every line of data. They had been exposed, naked before the galaxy, and by a single human. "Cut the feeds," he shouted. But the technicians replied that they couldn't. The systems no longer obeyed them. The networks refused every command, rerouting authority to an unknown source. A code that pulsed with one word at its core: terror. Panic spread as the realization hit. The Council's entire digital network, the same one they had forced humans to design, now answered to Earth. Guards stormed into the control center, firing on their own consoles in desperation. But it was already too late. Every server, every satellite, every communication relay was transmitting the files across the galaxy faster than anyone could stop. Billions of citizens on every world saw the truth. The same truth the Council had buried for centuries, and their faith turned to rage. In the slums of the industrial planets, workers who had once bowed to the Empire's laws threw down their tools, shouting, "We are free." On the agricultural moons, slaves tore off their collars as alien soldiers fled in fear of revolt. The galaxy was crumbling from within, and the Council hadn't even fired a shot. "This is sedition," shouted the reptilian general of the Drakari Dominion. "This is terrorism." "No," whispered the insectoid matriarch beside him, her voice shaking. "This is justice." The speaker pounded his staff against the floor, shards of crystal scattering across the hall. "Enough," he roared, his voice booming through the chamber. "We will strike back. We will show these humans what happens when they defy the Council." His rage was met with silence, the kind of silence that comes when fear and pride collide. "Contact the fleets," he ordered. "Mobilize the armada. I want Earth blockaded by dawn." The command was sent instantly, but no acknowledgement came. The communication officers exchanged nervous glances. "Sir, there's no response." The speaker's glow dimmed. "Then send a direct order." "We can't," the officer stammered. "The fleets, they're offline." Confusion turned to terror. More commands were issued. More systems failed. One by one, every terminal displayed the same message. "Access locked by Terran route command." The speaker stared in disbelief. "How is this possible?" The council's head technician trembled. "They built our systems, sir. They've been inside from the beginning." A murmur spread across the chamber like a contagion, centuries of arrogance shattering in a single moment. The mighty Galactic Council, rulers of 1,000 species, had been undone by the very race they had mocked as primitive. Across the stars, the first retaliatory orders were sent. Fleets scrambled to launch attacks on human colonies. But their engines refused to start, their weapons refused to charge. The very ships that symbolized the Empire's power now sat helpless, waiting for commands from a master they could not see, and the realization dawned: they were no longer in control of their own galaxy. The speaker's body cracked under stress, his glowing edges dimming to black. "Summon the Intelligence Bureau," he rasped. "I want to know everything about this human, this Elias Vale." Within minutes, a small group of trembling agents arrived, their scales pale, their eyes wide. "Sir," one began, "we tried to locate him, but he's gone." "Gone?" the speaker thundered. "He cannot just disappear." "He didn't," the agent said softly. "He left through the front door. No one stopped him." The chamber fell silent again, and for the first time in centuries, the council felt something it had never known before: fear of a single human. On Veltor's surface, riots had already begun, citizens chanting in dozens of alien languages, "Truth for all. End the lies." The speaker stared out from the balcony of the chamber, watching as the fire spread across the city, smoke rising toward the suns. "This cannot be," he whispered. "They are savages, not strategists." But deep down, he knew it wasn't savagery that had defeated them, it was patience. The humans had waited, building quietly, learning, watching, pretending to be weak until the galaxy believed it, and when the moment came, they had struck not with weapons, but with information, the sharpest blade in the universe. On Earth, Elias walked through the glass corridors of the Terran Command Complex, the blue glow of the ocean above filtering through the transparent ceiling, his steps calm, his face unreadable. "The Council has declared war," said a voice behind him, the Admiral of the Terran Defense Directorate. "Of course they have," Elias replied. "They don't know how to do anything else. Our network control is complete," the Admiral continued. "We could shut down every ship they own, collapse their economy, end their reign overnight." Elias stopped, turning slowly. "No," he said. "Not yet. Let them destroy themselves first. Arrogance is a weapon, and they're still holding it." On the Council's military worlds, command stations flickered as Terran AI systems quietly infiltrated them, feeding false data. Turning friend into foe, entire fleets vanished into deep space chasing phantom targets, while others began firing on their allies, convinced they were under attack. Chaos consumed the Empire before humanity ever launched a single missile. Back in the chamber, the speaker screamed for control, his voice cracking. "Deploy the Sentinels. We will not fall to insects." But the Sentinels, the ancient defense drones built to protect the Council, suddenly activated on their own, their eyes glowing red instead of blue, and then one of them spoke, in a cold, emotionless human voice, authority transferred to Terran command. The speaker stumbled backward as the Sentinels turned their weapons toward the chamber itself, and the delegates fled in terror, the Council collapsing into fire and panic. From orbit, hidden Terran observers watched the chaos unfold, their operators reporting, "Primary objective achieved, enemy systems compromised, Council command disbanded." On Earth, Elias received the message with a faint smile. "And the citizens?" he asked. "They're seeing the truth for the first time, sir." "Good," Elias said quietly. "Then let them choose whether to hate us or thank us. It doesn't matter either way." He turned his gaze toward the sky. "They wanted to humiliate us," he whispered, "but they forgot who taught them the meaning of pride." Back on Veltor, as the Council burned and the galaxy shook, alien broadcasters transmitted one last image before their networks went dark. The sight of humans watching, not cheering, not celebrating, simply observing with quiet eyes, and across the universe, every species that had once laughed at Earth now trembled, because the humans were no longer just another species. They were a reminder that even the smallest flame, if left unguarded, could burn 1,000 suns. The galaxy had seen many wars, billions had died in battles over territory, power, and pride, But never before had the stars fallen silent out of confusion, fear, and disbelief all at once. From the frozen moons of the Taral Dominion to the burning cities of Xarnes, every screen, every holodisplay, every broadcast replayed the same moment. Elias Vale smiling before the council, calm as the universe collapsed around him. The human who had turned the most powerful empire in the galaxy into a joke in less than an hour. Aliens everywhere argued whether the files were real, whether humanity had somehow faked the evidence, but none could deny what their eyes had seen. Entire worlds that had worshipped the council for centuries now turned on their leaders, and through that chaos, one sound began to spread, faint at first, then unstoppable. It was laughter, human laughter, and it echoed across the stars like a storm of defiance. It began on Mars, in the domed cities of the Red Frontier, where miners and engineers sat watching the trial replay. One of them chuckled, another followed. Soon the entire station roared with laughter, not out of madness but relief. The laughter of a species that had finally broken its chains. On lunar base, soldiers laughed as they watched alien news anchors stammer over the word humiliated. On Titan, children gathered around screens giggling as their parents smiled with tears in their eyes. And on Earth, the laughter was soft, not loud, but deep, like thunder rolling beneath. Calm waves, a sound that carried through every continent, every home, every ship, and soon, the galaxy began to hear it, through the hijacked frequencies of the Terran network, through radio static and broken alien news feeds. The laughter played over and over, haunting and powerful, a sound that made the mighty feel small. The Galactic Council tried to suppress it, jamming all transmissions, but it was too late. The laughter had spread like wildfire, recorded, copied, repeated, turned into music, into protest chants, into rebellion. And for the first time in living memory, the galaxy saw humans not as victims or underdogs, but as something else entirely, a force that found amusement in the face of tyranny, that refused to kneel even when surrounded, that laughed in the face of those who thought themselves gods. On Veltor, the speaker watched in horror as his own citizens began to laugh, their defiance echoing through the burning streets. Silence them! He roared, but his guards were already gone, their weapons discarded, their loyalty burned away by the truth. The once immortal empire was crumbling, and the only thing filling its silence was that sound, the one thing no empire could fight, human laughter. In the outer colonies, alien workers who had lived under human supervision for decades began to mimic the sound, unsure why, but feeling its meaning deep inside their hearts. It was the sound of rebellion, the sound of freedom, the sound of something unbreakable. Meanwhile, in the Terran Command complex deep beneath Earth's Pacific, Elias stood before a massive holoscreen showing the galaxy-wide transmission map, billions of signals lighting up. They're laughing, one technician said in awe. Elias nodded. Good, it means they understand. Understand what, sir? Another asked. Elias smiled faintly. That fear is the weapon of the weak, but laughter, that's the weapon of those who no longer fear. Behind him, the old Terran admiral stepped forward, his voice low. The Council has declared martial law across 3 sectors. They're calling for a holy war against Earth. Elias turned, his eyes steady. Then let them declare. No one will listen now, not after this. Should we respond? The admiral asked. No, Elias said calmly. The laughter will do our talking for us. Across the galaxy, that prophecy proved true. On dozens of council worlds, alien propaganda failed. No one cared about their speeches, because the only thing anyone wanted to hear was that sound again, the sound that had brought an empire to its knees. The alien elites called it psychological warfare, scholars called it the Terran echo, but humans called it something simpler, justice, and they knew it was only the beginning. In a darkened council bunker on Veltor, the speaker met with the remaining loyal members, their faces pale, their voices trembling. They've infected our networks, our people, our minds. One cried, it's not infection. The speaker hissed, it's mockery, they're mocking us. Then we must make them stop, shouted another. We must destroy Earth. The speaker turned to his generals. Prepare the fleets. But before the order was confirmed, one of the generals' holograms flickered, their face replaced by a Terran symbol, a white circle with a laughing human silhouette in its center, and then a human voice filled the bunker, calm, amused. You can't destroy what you don't understand. The connection cut instantly, leaving behind only the faint sound of laughter, looping endlessly, driving the room into panic. Back on Earth, the laughter subsided, replaced by quiet unity. Humanity had seen the moment their enemies broke, and they didn't need to celebrate, they simply prepared. In the hidden shipyards of Mars, the Terran fleets were awakened, massive vessels built in secret over decades now rising from beneath red dust, their hulls bearing no markings, no colors, only matte black armor designed to vanish in space. The engineers moved with precision, no cheers, no speeches, just purpose, because they knew what was coming. The Council would strike back, and when they did, Earth would be ready. Elias stood at the edge of the Pacific Command platform, watching the surface shimmer with the reflections of the moon. "They're angry now," the Admiral said. "Yes," Elias replied. "And angry people make mistakes. Let them burn themselves with their own fire." Across alien space, Council fleets began to mobilize, billions of soldiers chanting for vengeance, ships filling the void. But every time they spoke of Earth, every time they promised destruction, someone, somewhere, would play the human laughter again, and their fury would turn to hesitation, because deep inside, every soldier, every pilot, every commander knew the truth. Those who laugh in the face of death are not to be trifled with. In the months that followed, the laughter became legend. Entire systems surrendered to Earth without a single shot fired. Entire planets revolted against the Council, chanting one phrase: "We are Terran," even though they weren't human, because to be Terran now meant something greater. It meant to be free, fearless, and unbroken. And as the Council fleets gathered for their final assault, filling the skies over Earth's coordinates, the commanders listened to the static on their comms, trying to locate the Terran signals, and then it happened again, soft at first, distant, like a whisper through the stars. The laughter, not one voice this time, but thousands, millions, echoing from nowhere and everywhere, surrounding them like ghosts. The alien captains froze, their hearts pounding. And then one by one, their ships began to lose power, systems flickering, navigation gone, and a single message appeared on every console: "We warned you not to test our patience." The laughter grew louder, deeper, until the void itself seemed to shake, and in that moment every living creature in the galaxy finally understood what humanity had known since the beginning: that the most dangerous thing in the universe was not anger, not war, not hate, but the sound of a species that had suffered everything, survived everything, and still found the strength to laugh. The Council had lost its pride, its control, and its illusion of power, and now all that was left was rage. Blind, consuming rage. It didn't matter that half their fleets were disabled, that their systems were compromised, or that their people were revolting. All they wanted now was revenge. The speaker stood before a new assembly formed in secrecy beneath the scorched towers of Veltor, his once shining crystalline body now cracked and dim, his voice a rasp of fury. "They humiliated us before the galaxy," he growled. "They made the gods of the stars into clowns. They made the Council bleed, and now we will drown them in their own laughter." He slammed his clawed hand against the console. "Mobilize everything that still flies. I want Earth erased from every chart before the next dawn." The generals hesitated, their faces pale under the flickering light. "Sir, the Terrans control our communications network," one said carefully. "Our command relays still aren't secure." "Then cut them out," the speaker shouted. "Use analog systems if you have to. I don't care how. I want warships in orbit before the sun set." The hall echoed with shouts as orders were barked across a dozen languages. Fleets from every remaining loyal species were summoned, entire armadas moving towards Sol space. Millions of soldiers filled carriers and dreadnoughts, all fueled by propaganda that spoke of the savage humans who poisoned the galaxy. But the truth was simpler. The Council was terrified, and terrified creatures often mistake vengeance for strength. In the shadows of deep space, Terran probes watched silently, invisible to every alien sensor, their AI cores whispering data back to Earth in real time. The humans knew everything: the fleet's numbers, their trajectories, even the exact hour they would arrive, and yet Earth did nothing. No alarms, no mobilizations, no speeches. It was as if humanity was waiting, like a hunter letting its prey believe it still had hope. The first wave of the Council's armada entered Sol's Edge 3 days later, 30,000 ships spanning light years, their hulls glowing with power, their commanders smug in their assumption that Earth would finally kneel. "Begin planetary scans," ordered Admiral Karesh of the Drakari Dominion, "and prepare orbital bombardment protocols." But the scanners showed nothing: no fleet, no resistance, not even satellites. "Are they hiding underground?" one officer asked. "No," said another. "It's like they're gone." Confusion rippled through the bridge. Then one of the younger officers gasped, "Sir, where's Neptune?" The Admiral frowned, turning toward the viewport, and froze. The space where Neptune had been was empty, replaced by a massive gravitational distortion, a ripple of light bending inwards. "Impossible," Karesh whispered. "That's not a planet. It's a field generator." Before he could react, alarm screamed across the fleet. Gravitational interference. "We're being pulled off course." Ships tumbled as engines failed, hulls groaning under invisible pressure. Then, from the shadows beyond the distortion, something moved, enormous, silent, impossible. "Multiple contacts," shouted a sensor officer. "They're uncloaking right in front of us." One by one, dark shapes emerged from the void, matte black warships the size of cities. their surfaces absorbing all light, their hulls bearing no insignia, no markings, no signals, just silence, and then, slowly, the lead ship's identification code appeared on their scanners. TSS Leviathan, a Terran dreadnought long rumored to be a myth. This is Admiral Koresh, the alien shouted into his comms, identify yourself. But the only reply was static, and then, faintly through the static, a sound. The unmistakable echo of laughter, human laughter, calm, almost gentle, but in that vast silence, it was terrifying. All units fire. Koresh screamed, the entire fleet unleashed its fury, plasma cannons, ion torpedoes, stellar lancers, enough firepower to vaporize a moon. The void lit up with fury, but when the light faded, the Terran ships were still there, untouched, unmoving, their black hulls glinting faintly under the light of distant suns. How? One officer gasped. What are they made of? Nothing we can penetrate, another whispered, and before they could think of retreat, the Terran ships moved, no flare of engines, no sound, they simply shifted. As if space itself bent around them, and then the destruction began. Beams of silent white light cut through alien vessels like paper, implosions rippled outward as ships folded in on themselves, crushed by invisible gravity, no explosions, no screams, just silence, and in that silence, the laughter returned, faint, distant, echoing through every comm channel. Some soldiers began to cry, others ripped out their earpieces. But the sound was everywhere. They're toying with us. Koresh shouted, but even he could hear the tremor in his voice. They're not fighting, they're demonstrating. Within minutes, entire fleets were gone, reduced to drifting wrecks, the survivors watching in horror as the Terran ships simply vanished again, cloaking as if they'd never existed. Where did they go? One captain cried, everywhere. Came a human voice over the comm, and then static swallowed the rest. Back on Veltor, the speaker watched the reports come in, his claws shaking. 50 fleets lost, in an hour, his aide whispered. That can't be true. But it was. Footage from the battlefield showed nothing but black void and broken debris. They didn't even fire a warning, the aide said softly. They just erased us. The speaker turned toward the window, staring at the suns beyond. We mocked them for centuries, he muttered. Called them primitive, reckless, emotional. His voice cracked. But they are something else entirely. Behind him, another officer entered, pale and trembling. Sir, new transmission. The speaker turned. From who? Earth, the officer said. They've sent a message. The holoscreen flickered, revealing the calm face of Elias Vale, sitting in what appeared to be a simple Terran command room. This isn't a declaration of war, Elias said, his tone even. You already declared it when you decided to treat us as lesser. We're simply replying. He leaned closer, eyes cold and steady. We could destroy you now, every ship, every station, every planet. But we won't, the speaker growled. Why not? Elias smiled faintly. Because extinction would be mercy. Then the feed ended, leaving only static and the faint echo of laughter. The speaker sank back into his chair, trembling. They're not fighting to win, he whispered. They're fighting to remind us who they are, and across the galaxy, every alien species that once laughed at humanity finally understood what the Council had unleashed. Not monsters, not conquerors, but survivors who had learned how to turn pain into power. And now, there. Silence was more terrifying than war itself. Space was silent again. But it was not peace, it was the kind of silence that comes after something unthinkable, when even the stars seem afraid to shine. The wreckage of 50 fleets drifted between the orbits of Neptune and Pluto, shattered hulls glowing faintly in the dark like floating tombs, millions of soldiers gone, thousands of ships erased, and not a single human casualty reported. The Council had sent their finest, their deadliest, and they had vanished in less than an hour. The survivors spoke of invisible weapons, of ships that bent light, of laughter echoing through their comms until they lost their minds, and though the Council tried to silence them, the story spread faster than light. Every world heard of the massacre at Sol's Edge, every civilization learned the same truth. Earth had not only survived, it had dominated. In the Council's emergency chamber, panic replaced pride, the speaker's crystalline body now blackened with cracks, his once golden glow reduced to faint pulses of dying light. Impossible. He rasped, slamming his claws against the table. How could they have built such weapons without us knowing? The answer came from one of the younger delegates, trembling as he spoke. Because we never looked, we were too busy watching ourselves. The room filled with silence, the kind that feels heavier than words. And now, the speaker hissed, the galaxy watches them. Outside the chamber, riots burned across every council world. Slaves rose against their masters, planetary governors fled in fear, and in every rebellion, the same phrase appeared. The Terrans are free, and so are we. But Earth didn't send speeches, didn't claim credit, it simply watched, calm and unmoving. The humans had done nothing but reveal the truth, and that was enough to make the galaxy turn against its rulers. In orbit above Earth, the Terran fleet floated in perfect formation, silent as ghosts, their matte black hulls reflecting no light, massive dreadnoughts like shadows cast by gods. At their center stood the flagship TSS Leviathan, its command bridge quiet, bathed in the soft glow of blue data streams. The admiral stood with hands clasped behind his back, watching reports flow in. All hostile fleets eliminated, the officer reported. Remaining ships are retreating toward Veltor. Let them. The admiral said, his voice low, steady, almost weary. Fear will move faster than our guns ever could. Behind him, Elias Vale stood with the same calm expression he'd worn at the trial. It's over, the admiral said. No, Elias replied. It's just beginning. You think they'll come back? They'll try, Elias said. But this time, it won't be fleets or armies. It'll be something worse. They'll turn to propaganda, to poison, to desperation, and that's when the real war begins. The admiral nodded, understanding. Then we hold the line. No, Elias said softly, turning to face the viewport where Earth glowed below. We don't hold, we teach. In that moment, across thousands of systems, the remaining council commanders prepared a final strike. Desperate to reclaim their dignity, they gathered what little remained of their fleets, patching together damaged ships, salvaging weapons, and marching toward Veltor for one last stand. If Earth wants to make a mockery of us, one shouted, then we will die proving we are not weak. But as they assembled, strange readings began to appear on their sensors, gravitational anomalies, distortions of light. One commander whispered, they're here, and within seconds, the Terran fleet emerged, not from hyperspace, but from the very shadows of their own fleets, human warships hidden in gravitational folds, moving faster than sensors could track, and before any order could be given, the stars turned white. The Terrans didn't fire plasma or torpedoes, they used something else. Compression weapons, invisible waves that crushed ships from the inside out, bending metal and bone alike into silence. The Council fleet didn't explode, it simply vanished, folded into itself like dust swallowed by the void. No debris, no screams, only a flash of light and the faint sound of laughter in the comms. They're laughing again. One alien screamed before his signal went dead. The battle lasted 9 minutes. 9 minutes to erase the last organized fleet in the galaxy. When the light faded, only Terran ships remained. Motionless, calm, silent, their engines glowing faintly like embers in the dark, and then, as quickly as they had come, they turned and vanished, leaving nothing behind but an empty sky. On Veltor, alarms blared, communication towers flashing red. The fleet, our fleet, it's gone! Screamed an officer. The speaker rose from his throne, his voice trembling. No, it can't be. It is, said another. They've destroyed everything. The speaker sank to his knees, his crystalline body dimming completely. Then it's true, he whispered. The age of the Council is over, and as he said it, across the galaxy, the systems that had once sworn loyalty to him began declaring independence. One by one, entire star clusters refusing to send tribute, governors turning their worlds into free republics, and through it all, one word was whispered with fear and awe, Earth. In the Terran Command Complex, Elias watched the galaxy map flicker as Council worlds changed color, red fading to blue, one after another. It's collapsing faster than expected, the Admiral said. Do we move to occupy? Elias shook his head. No, let them rebuild. They'll tell their children that we spared them, and that's worth more than conquest. The Admiral frowned. You're giving them mercy, Elias nodded. Mercy is the weapon they'll never understand. As the Terran fleet powered down its engines, their lights dimmed, leaving the void once more in silence, and yet the galaxy couldn't stop hearing that sound. The echo of laughter that had spread across space, replayed, remembered, feared, in every alien mind it became a legend. The moment the gods fell and the mortals laughed, and from that day onward, the stars carried a new warning whispered in every corner of the galaxy, never make Earth laugh again. The galaxy was burning and silent at the same time. Billions of voices choked beneath the weight of what had just happened, fleets gone, empires shattered, and the proud Galactic Council reduced to a whisper of fear across 1,000 worlds. The Council's banners were torn down, its monuments defaced, its palaces turned into prisons for the leaders who had once called themselves gods. But amidst the chaos, one thing united every species: questions. Questions about how Earth, that small blue world once mocked as primitive, could have done this. The survivors of the last fleet spoke of shadows that moved faster than thought, of ships that killed without firing, and of laughter echoing through the void like a ghost. But no one on those worlds had seen the humans, not directly, They had only seen the results, as if Earth's vengeance was carried out by the universe itself, and so, across the scattered remains of the galaxy's infrastructure, whispers began. Maybe the humans weren't just another species. Maybe they were something older, something the stars themselves had chosen to protect. The Council tried to fight back against that narrative, releasing desperate propaganda that painted Earth as a monster, but no one believed them anymore, not after centuries of lies. And then, when the galaxy was at its breaking point, the humans spoke again. The broadcast didn't come through official channels, it didn't come through military bands or encoded transmissions, it came through everything, every frequency, every screen, every device, all at once, and across the stars. Beings of every shape and world froze as their devices flickered and shifted to display a single figure, a man standing in front of a plain metal wall, no flag behind him, no army around him, just calm eyes and a voice that carried the weight of judgment. It was Elias Vale. To the citizens of the galaxy, he began, his tone even, measured, like a teacher explaining a lesson. You have all seen what your leaders called justice, you have seen what they did in the name of order, and you have seen what happens when truth is silenced. His gaze lifted slightly, and though his voice was soft, it filled every heart with dread and clarity at once. We were called savages, thieves, rebels, but it was your empires that enslaved billions, your councils that burned worlds, your soldiers that laughed as they turned life into ash. We asked for peace, and you gave us silence, so we learned to speak in a language you would understand. The broadcast cut briefly to images, real footage from council archives, war crimes, labor camps, destruction, each scene tagged with dates and the insignia of the council's own seal. The galaxy watched, unable to turn away. This, Elias continued, is what your council called peace, and this is what we call the truth. His hand moved, revealing the logo of the Terran Defense Directorate, glowing softly in the air. We do not seek dominion, we do not demand tribute, we only demand memory. Remember this, every world that falls to arrogance, every ruler that forgets mercy, every species that forgets compassion, will someday face its reflection, and on that day, it will remember us. He paused, eyes narrowing slightly. We are not gods, and we never wanted to be, but you forced us to act as one. On every world, aliens wept, not from fear, but from shame, because for the first time, they understood the weight of their own complicity. How many times had they looked away when the council enslaved others? How many times had they believed the lies because they were comfortable? And now, those lies had turned to ash. Humanity will not conquer you, Elias said. We have no need for empires, we have no desire to rule. We have learned what power does to those who worship it, so instead, we give you a gift, the truth, and the choice of what to do with it. The camera drew closer to his face, his eyes reflecting the light of distant stars. We will watch, he said. Not as masters, but as witnesses, and if you ever again raise the whip, if you ever again silence the innocent, we will return, not to destroy, but to remind, because laughter can become wrath, and silence can become war. Then, his expression softened, the cold steel of command giving way to something human, tired, but resolute. To those who still believe in peace, rebuild it, not because we spared you, but because you finally deserve it. The screen faded to black, but the transmission didn't end. Instead, a new sound filled the galaxy, the same laughter that had haunted their nightmares, but this time, it was different, not mocking, not cruel, just calm, confident, a sound of finality. And in that sound, every species understood that the humans had already moved on, the war was over for them, the galaxy had been judged, and humanity had no more to prove. On Veltor, the speaker fell to his knees in front of the dying council's great window, staring out into the void where the Terran fleet had vanished, his hands trembling. They don't even want the throne, he whispered. They just wanted us to look in the mirror. Around him, his aides stood in silence, their faces pale, because they all understood the same thing. The council wasn't defeated by weapons, it was defeated by truth, and truth is something you can't rebuild. On the Terran flagship, the Admiral turned to Elias as the transmission ended. They'll call this a victory, he said quietly. It's not, Elias replied. It's a lesson. The Admiral looked at him. And what if they don't learn? Elias' eyes drifted toward Earth through the viewport, the blue planet shining beneath the void. Then the laughter will return, he said softly. And next time, it won't stop. The Admiral said nothing, and in that silence, the stars themselves seemed to listen, the laughter fading like the echo of thunder after a storm. The galaxy would rebuild, but it would never forget, because the humans had taught them something no weapon ever could, that the most dangerous thing in the universe was a species that refused to bow, that smiled in the face of death, and that could turn truth into a weapon sharper than any blade. And now, that truth belonged to everyone, carried forever in the echoes of the Terran broadcast that had ended an empire. The Galactic Council was gone, not in a blaze of glory or a final battle, but in silence, its halls abandoned, its symbols shattered, and its laws nothing but dust floating through the cold air of Veltor's dying city. What was once called the center of the universe was now just ruins. Broken towers of crystal reflecting the fire of rebellion burning below. Entire districts looted by their own citizens. Worlds once proud to serve under the Council now declaring independence, and everywhere, the same whisper spread, Earth had ended the age of gods, not by conquest but by exposure, and in doing so, they had set fire to the galaxy's pride. The speaker, once the most feared being in the cosmos, sat alone in the council chamber, his body dimmed to grey, his light nearly gone. Around him the air was filled with ash and the faint echoes of old laughter. He stared at the council's seal on the floor, now cracked, the symbol of their endless rule split down the middle. How could one world undo 1,000? He muttered, his voice hollow. We ruled for millennia, and now, they rule by saying nothing. His aide stood trembling nearby. Sir, most of our fleets have surrendered, our colonies have stopped responding, and the colonies near the rim have joined a Terran alliance, not by force, by choice. The speaker turned. By choice. The aide nodded. They believe in them, sir. They say humanity gave them freedom, and they owe their loyalty to the ones who broke their chains. The speaker's body flickered with a faint pulse of rage. They didn't give them freedom, he hissed. They gave them fear. But deep down he knew it wasn't true. Fear could not make a galaxy laugh. Fear could not make slaves tear down banners. Only truth could do that, and truth was what Earth had unleashed. Across the stars, chaos was turning into order, not under a new empire but under a quiet understanding, one that spread faster than any army could march. Species that had been enemies for centuries sat at the same tables, their leaders meeting under a single flag. The Charter of Sol, a new treaty written not by politicians but by scholars and refugees, and signed in digital ink that bore the seal of Earth. The document had only one law that mattered. No species shall claim dominion over another. And under that promise, the galaxy began to rebuild, slowly, painfully, but free. Meanwhile, the remnants of the Council tried to regroup, gathering in secret on a shadow world near the galactic core, a handful of surviving generals and governors, their faces drawn and bitter. We can't let them win the narrative, one hissed. If they write history, we will be the villains forever, another shouted. We need to strike back, to remind the galaxy that the Council still stands. But none of them noticed the flicker in the shadows of the room, the faint hum of a Terran probe, recording every word, and hours later, their secret location appeared on every network, exposed again by the very species they feared most, and the people, tired of lies, stormed the compound themselves, tearing apart the last remnants of their rulers. No Terran ships intervened, no human soldiers fired a shot, because Earth didn't need to fight anymore. The galaxy was doing its work for them. On Mars, Elias watched the reports from a war room lit by soft blue light, his hands clasped behind his back as data flowed across the holoscreens. Veltor has fallen, reported the AI. Council members presumed dead, multiple planetary governments requesting Terran oversight. Deny it, Elias said quietly. We won't rule them. Sir, they'll destroy themselves, the AI warned. Then let them learn, Elias said, his tone weary but resolute. They wanted gods, and we showed them monsters. Now, they'll have to learn to live without either. The Admiral approached, his face lined with age. They're calling it the Terran Age. Elias turned to him slowly, his eyes tired. Age's end, Admiral, this one will too. Someday they'll forget what we did, and when they do, someone else will rise and repeat the same mistakes. Then we'll stop them again, the Admiral said. No, Elias whispered. Then someone else will laugh. That's how it's meant to be. Far across the stars, on the distant colony of Alara, once a slave world, children played in the open fields under a sky they could finally call their own, and their parents told them stories, not of gods or heroes, but of humans, of how they stood alone before the galaxy and smiled, of how they destroyed empires not with weapons but with laughter, and how they taught the stars that no voice, no matter how small, should ever be silenced again. In time, statues of Elias Vale were built across dozens of worlds, not towering monuments, but small bronze figures of a man standing calmly with his hands behind his back, a faint smile on his lips, and under each one, the same inscription in hundreds of languages. He made the galaxy laugh, and it never stopped echoing. On Earth, the Terran fleet returned home, their ships descending into orbit one by one, engines quiet, hulls scorched, but undefeated. As they passed over the planet's surface, lights from the cities below blinked in response, a silent welcome from a world that had finally been heard. And in the Terran command complex, Elias watched from the observation deck, the blue glow of the oceans reflecting in his eyes. Do you think they'll ever forgive us? The Admiral asked quietly. Elias smiled. Faintly, They already have, he said. We gave them truth, and truth always hurts before it heals. Later that night, when the stars shone clear and calm, the last surviving transmission from the Council's archives was found, a recording of the speaker before his death, his voice broken and soft. Tell them they laughed. He whispered, and the gods fell. That message became the final record of the Galactic Council, the last words of an empire that once ruled everything and understood nothing, and the historians of a new age would write that when humanity laughed, the galaxy finally listened. In the centuries that followed, the story became myth, the laughter became legend, and though empires rose and fell, no one ever forgot the day the Council tried to humiliate Earth, and humanity responded with a smile that broke the stars. Centuries passed, and yet the story of that day, the day the galaxy laughed with humanity, was still whispered across the stars. It became a legend retold in 1,000 tongues, sung by children who had never seen Earth, and remembered by species who once feared to speak the word human. The Galactic Council was gone, but its ruins still floated above Veltor's dead oceans, a monument to arrogance and pride. Ships from 100 worlds now passed by it silently, leaving offerings, small flags, carved stones, flowers, and sometimes even laughter recorded on old comm devices, played into the endless void as tribute to the moment the universe had changed forever. They called it the Day of Echoes, because on that day, the sound of human laughter had spread across the stars and never truly stopped. It echoed in their memories, in their histories, in their art, and in the quiet understanding that truth was the strongest force in existence. On Earth, the world had changed. The Terran Defense Directorate was gone, replaced by the Solar Accord, an organization not of soldiers but of teachers, diplomats, and observers. The warships of old rested beneath the oceans, sealed in silence, not as weapons of fear but as reminders of restraint. Humanity had turned inward, rebuilding itself not as conquerors but as custodians of peace. The blue planet, once mocked as primitive, now stood as the heart of reason, the place where every new treaty was written, every conflict mediated, and every lie eventually unraveled. But even in peace, they never forgot the lesson, because peace built on arrogance was only another kind of war. Elias Vale was long gone, his body buried in the Terran gardens under a glass sky filled with stars, but his words lived on, taught in every academy, etched in stone across every colony. Power is not in the hand that strikes, the inscription read, but in the hand that chooses not to. His face was carved into history, not as a ruler, not as a warrior, but as the man who laughed before the gods and proved they were mortal. Generations after his passing, on the anniversary of the Council's fall, the galaxy celebrated the Day of Echoes, entire planets turning off their communications for 1 minute of silence, followed by 1 minute of laughter broadcast together in harmony. Billions of voices across the stars, human and alien alike, laughing not out of mockery but unity, because that sound no longer meant defiance, it meant freedom. On the distant world of Alara, a young alien girl sat under the light of 3 moons. Her teacher, a human historian, told her the story again. Is it true? She asked softly, her eyes wide. Did one man really make the whole galaxy laugh? The teacher smiled. No, child, not one man, one species, one world that remembered what it means to stand for truth when all others kneel. The girl giggled, and they didn't use guns. No, the teacher said. They used something much stronger. What's that? The girl asked. The teacher looked up at the stars and whispered, courage. Somewhere beyond Alara, in the void between systems, Terran outpost ships patrolled silently, not as conquerors but as watchers, their black hulls reflecting nothing, their crews carrying no pride, only purpose, to ensure the peace they had bought with pain endured. And on the bridge of one of those ships, an old captain watched the stars drift by, his voice quiet over the intercom. All systems stable, quiet night. His second officer smiled. Do you ever wonder what it was like, back then, when the Council tried to humiliate us? The captain's gaze remained fixed on the void. I was born too late for that war, he said softly, but I was born because of it. You think it'll happen again? The officer asked. The captain smiled faintly. If it does, they'll hear us coming. And for a moment, the ship speakers played an old audio file, the same sound that started it all, the recording of human laughter echoing through the void, soft and haunting, fading into the stars. Back on Veltor, nature had reclaimed what was left, the once burning cities now jungles of crystal vines. The great council hall collapsed into ruins, and in the center of that ruin stood a single monument placed there by a Terran expedition centuries ago. It was simple, a metal plate, untouched by time, with words written in hundreds of languages. Here ended the age of arrogance, here began the age of truth. Below it, in small letters, one final message written only in Terran Standard, never. Forget to laugh. Every visitor who read it smiled. Some even laughed softly to themselves. as if honoring the spirit of the humans who taught the galaxy how to stand again. On Earth, the people had changed too. Humanity had spread to every corner of known space, but they never built empires, never raised banners of conquest. They lived among others, quietly, peacefully, and yet every being who met a human could still feel something different. A spark in their eyes, a calm in their voice, a confidence that didn't need to be shouted, as if they carried within them the memory of what their ancestors had done, and the wisdom never to repeat it. And sometimes, when war threatened once more between alien nations, when greed began to rise again, the humans would step forward, unarmed, smiling, and say, "Do we need to remind you?" And those words alone were enough to make entire fleets stand down, because no one wanted to hear the laughter again, not the laughter of cruelty, but of inevitability, the sound that meant the universe had been warned. Thousands of years later, when humanity had moved beyond the Milky Way, beyond even the reach of its old maps, travelers from distant galaxies still spoke of them. They called them the laughing race, the keepers of silence, the ones who destroyed tyranny with truth and replaced fear with laughter. And though no one had seen Earth in ages, they said that if you flew far enough into the void and listened closely, you could still hear it. The faint echo of laughter carried by the cosmic wind, a sound older than war, stronger than gods, a reminder to every civilization that power without conscience leads only to ruin. And so it was that the legend of humanity became eternal, not as destroyers, not as saviors, but as the teachers of the stars. The day the galaxy laughed was not the end of the story, it was the beginning, and in that laughter was everything the universe needed to remember. Truth, courage, defiance, mercy, and the unbreakable will of the species that once looked into the eyes of gods, smiled, and said, "We are not afraid."